So now we're back in the blue board again. I'm going to talk about the first steps that we're going to take. So let's do that now. So really we're going to start off by the very basics, you know, what we need for the trade, obviously the tools, and the tools that we're going to be using here is Visual Studio 2012. However, I'm going to show you how to download 2013 if you've got Windows 8 or maybe a slightly earlier version, maybe like Visual Studio Express 2010 or anything like that. So I'm going to show you how to get all these tools absolutely free of charge, and during these tutorials you're going to learn about how to use Visual Studio. So it's not just all about C#. There's a lot of transferable skills, like in every video that I create. I'm going to be showing you how to use a tool which then you can go on with C++, Fortran or any other programming language that's included in the Visual Studio package. So once we get Visual Studio, how to actually create the GUI, so the graphic user interface of the application. So designing the form, so designing the actual form of the application and all the different components on the form. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and then we'll start with the very basics. So let's start by maybe teaching you how to do the exit button. Then obviously the clear button, writing class. So let's create a class. So we'll teach you how to create a class in C#. Next we could talk about the main application, so the main class itself, and then we'll actually go into reading the file. So reading the file and obviously the read file button. We'll show you how to include those two together, so it will actually start displaying the content of the file on the screen like we've seen in the demo. And then what we can do, we can look at, you know, exceptions as well. So having an exception to wrap around when you're loading up the file, just in case the file isn't available. We want to notify the user that the file doesn't exist in some way, so we'll need to do that, and I'll show you that little thing that I did whereby when you're actually trying to upload a file or add a file, it will actually detect if the file is added or if the file doesn't exist or it's a blank field. So we'll talk about exceptions. So this is like error handling, it's just another word for it, which if you've watched any of my previous videos, it's basically the fourth construct that I usually cover. It will be very helpful if you're new to programming to look over some of these programming videos that I've created in the past. And if you want to learn an easier language or just to get the concepts in your head, I would actually recommend looking at PHP, because it's just a very easy language, very quick language to learn, and then from that you can start looking at, you know, Java, C#, C++. What we're expecting to cover in total is obviously the tool, using the tools, Visual Studio, the GUI, the exit button, clear button, and functionality. We'll code the functionality, create the class. The main application, will look at how it reads in, you know, the class that we've created into the main application, how it's all included together, and then we'll look at reading the file. Now this is where it starts to get into the actual mechanics of the application that we're building. We'll read the file, program the button, activate. Once the user clicks on read file, it will actually start displaying the file on the screen. We'll talk about exceptions and error handling, and then finally what we'll do the evaluate button or the results button. So we'll talk about the results button, and part of that we're going to be introducing you to a number of concepts. Namely, we're going to be doing some arrays. We'll also do the for loop. So you'll learn a bit about the for loop, for each loop. We might actually include the for each loop, and we'll introduce you to data types. So we'll talk about data types, which will include strings, obviously dynamic, and we'll also talk about primitive data types such as int, and what else should we cover? We'll just cover int. I think this is all we're going to be needing. So int and strings. We'll also cover the switch statement and if condition. So yeah, so there's some basic concepts in programming that will be covered while we're learning C#, and you will see how we implement it in C#. Yeah, so we use the switch statement to obviously give us an indication of what is in the file, as in operations. So if it's an add, then we want the plus sign, we want to perform some sort of arithmetical operations. So we'll add that here as well, and we'll add some part of the switch statement. We'll also cover some operations such as plus, multiplication, if I can find the button, division, subtraction. So these operations we'll cover, and how to actually perform them in the application. It's just basic programming if you're new to it, and I think that's pretty much what we need to learn to create the application. So we're going to be doing that. We'll be learning as we're building, which is a new way of learning, and that's why I called it learning C# by example.